Right, welcome everyone. Item 1 is attendance. Thank you all for coming. Item 2, apologies for absence. Apologies from Councillor Richard Clark. Other than that, we're all here. So if we move on to item 3, declarations of interest.
Thank you, Lisa. Members, there are a number of declarations this morning. I will read out the ones that I know, but can I just remind you, if you have any interest in any of the agenda items, and please let me know as we go along. Firstly, in agenda item number 7, Councillor Crick has a personal and prejudicial interest because her husband is on the museum's board. He is vice chair. Councillor Crick, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, that's appreciated.
So would you like me to leave the room?
That's correct, when we get to that item, if you could do that. Thank you. And then Councillor Jones has a personal interest in the Blaenavon Management Plan, and I believe that's agenda item number 9. That's because he's a consultee, he's a Blaenavon Town Councillor, and also because he's chair of the World Heritage Group. So, Councillor Jones, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you very much. That's noted then. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Justine. Any other members want to declare any other interests? Okay, we'll move on then to confirmation of the Cabinet minutes for the 10th of July. If I take you through the pages one by one, we start on page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, and the Welsh language version starts on page 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 and 14. Is everyone happy with those as a true and accurate record? Let's move on to item number 5 then, the Cabinet action sheet. There's no outstanding actions listed on that, unless anyone's got anything that needs adding to that. We'll move straight on to item 6, which is the initial financial forecast. And I'll bring in Dave Lilly to take us through this item.
Thank you, Leader. This is the first formal report that we had on the 2018-19 budget. So it's presenting to Cabinet the initial forecast using the month 3 end of June data, and where appropriate, and we have updated information we've used. There's a small comments on month 4 as well. The position at the moment on the revenue account that we're forecasting is a £1.7 million adverse variance to the £173 million base budget. The table at the top of page 2 in paragraph 5.1 gives a summary of where those pressures are being currently felt. Obviously the 1.7 million position is a forecasted position, it's not an actual position, so if we can make corrective action during the year, hopefully the adverse position will go away. So that the principal areas of concern which are outlined in the report are social care and housing, are showing a £1.3 million adverse position, and this is in the same way as we had the pressure last year. Is children's demand is continuing to grow within the borough. I hope Cabinet can remember we've uplifted the budget by just under £1 million for demand pressures in 18-19, but the demand has continued to come through the door. We are seeing over 30 children have come into the service since the 1st of April, which is over and above the estimate position. Considerable work is being done within the service area to look to see how we can bring that figure back, and they are outlined within paragraph 5.2.1. The neighbourhood services position, again, is a continuing pressure from previous years, and was something that we recognised when we built the 2018 budget, and the pressure revolves completely around tour and training and the non-adherence to the conditions of the Welsh Government grant with regarding learner numbers within the service, so that we're not seeing the learner numbers coming in to enable the service to draw down the grant as predicted. So we uplifted the budget by over £300,000 in 18-19, but again, the situation is worse than we anticipated at budget setting. Resources, they're showing a £229,000 adverse position, and that's primarily around benefits on supported accommodation, where we are unable to claim back all of the benefit that is provided. So there's both a benefit and a service charge. What we can only claim back from the DWP, the benefit element, we are not able to claim back the service charge. And there are a couple of small mitigations that haven't been delivered as yet, but the service is working through those at the moment. The service has put together an action plan, which is seeing the adverse position dropped from the 229 at month 4, and we're hopeful that's going to come down even further. I'll come back to corporate mitigations if that's okay, and then the other line, which is a nice line to talk about. We've had some additional windfall income from two areas. One being a higher than anticipated distribution of reserves from the Gwent Cremation Committee. The Gwent Cremation Committee each year give us an allocation of the reserves based on their in-year performance. We budgeted at £120,000. Their performance last year and their level of retained reserves was quite high, so the Joint Committee took the decision to redistribute some reserves back to the authorities, and they've given us an extra £178,000, which was very nice to have. The other one is we were successful in a claim we put in against the HMRC, where we claimed back some historic VAT going back into the dim distant past on leisure activities. So it was all activities before the Leisure Trust came into existence. Going back now to the corporate mitigations, they are outlined on 5.2.9 on page 5 of the report, and the table there shows the positions against each of the individual lines. So the review of fees and charges, we had a budget in of 200,000. We've delivered 141,000, so it's £59,000 still to achieve. What's going on at the moment is a body of work going on looking at the income levels that we have and the subsidisation levels that are occurring within the services, with a view to bringing a report back to Cabinet towards the end of the financial year, so it'll build in as part of the 2019-20 budget build. Okay, so that we don't think that our 59,000 is going to be achieved. The review of Part B of the business plan, that process is still ongoing, so at the moment we're forecasting that isn't going to be achieved. Doing things one way, again, we have deferred that following discussions in consideration of the 2019-20 and the medium-term pressure that we have. We're taking a more holistic approach to doing that piece of work, so that's going to form part of the considerations as we move forward into the medium-term financial planning over the next couple of months. So hopefully in between now and Christmas you'll be having a further update on that, about how we will be taking that forward and delivering that saving in the longer term. The review of third sector grants, again, that project is still ongoing, so we're currently reviewing all of the contractual arrangements that we have with the third sectors to identify where and how quickly we can remove or change the relationships between the council and the third sectors, and that's going on at the moment. At the moment, that's saying that nothing's going to be achieved. We believe there will be something we achieve. We were very pessimistic within this report, but it's not going to be the £106,000. And then the last point then is the procurement. A body of work has been done on that, which has identified a significant proportion of the 104,000 that we can possibly take out, but we need to do some work on how the procurement activities link into the budgeted activities, because we're unsure at the moment whether those activities are base budget funded or grant funded. So we're doing some work on that to get under the skin of it. So we're hopeful again that some of that will be achieved, possibly half of it. With regards to the mitigations that were approved as part of the budget, these are outlined in paragraph 6.1 in a table there, and you'll see that we have 81% of the mitigations have been achieved, or will be achieved during the year, and we have 18% that are of medium or high risk. Those at a high risk have been assumed within here as not being achieved, and they are outlined in paragraph 6.2. And the bottom one is a repeat of the corporate mitigations that I just spoke about. In paragraph 6.3, there are the details of the alternative mitigations that have been identified to compensate for a non-achievable saving. So that covers off the revenue budget. The next section of the report is just a summary of a forecast to year end of our reserves position. It doesn't take into account any of the positions that we've outlined in the first part, because we're hopeful that most of them will be addressed, or hoping that they're going to be addressed, and it gives you a projection through the end of the year. As we outlined when we set the budget in March time, there has been a reduction in the reserves because services are using them to change. They're not underpinning the budget; they're being used to change. So we are seeing a reduction there. The final section of the report is the capital section. So that's outlined in paragraph 8 on page 9 of the report, page 25 of the agenda, and again, there has been a movement in the programme, and the movement in the programme has been dominated by the post-16, the delay in post-16 project because of the information not coming through from Welsh Government and the approval coming through from Welsh Government. But when we've taken that into account, all services are saying that they're going to hit the revised budget timeline and financial envelope. Thank you, Leader. I'll just take any questions that we currently have.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Any questions before I say something? I just wanted to thank Dave and the staff throughout the council for their work on this. I know that sort of the £1.7 million is just about within 1% of our budget. So whilst it's not something that we can take for granted, it's not a position that's out of step with other councils. I think that the area of social care is one of particular concern across the UK. Those pressures are being felt by councils the length and breadth of the country as demand continues to rise. Thank you for the work that I know you and social care colleagues are doing to try and address that and make sure that we, on top of the extra resource that we put into there in the budget, that we bring that online. But I think that's something that perhaps national politicians need to note as well, the pressure that is being faced by social care departments across the UK in protecting some of our most vulnerable people. So thank you for the work you've done on that report, and if people are happy to move to the recommendations on pages 25 and 26, it's recommended at 10.1 that the forecast position in respect of each service area and the actions being taken by service chief officers to address their adverse variances are noted. Secondly, that specific approval is given as per paragraph 7.3, and thirdly, that specific approvals relating to the use or amendment of reserves are actioned by the leader in accordance with normal practice. Have a show of hands in favour? That's carried. Thank you, Dave. If we move on then to agenda item 7, which is the Torvine Museum Trust reports. I'll bring in Rachel Jarrett at this point. Thank you, Rachel. Great.
asked officers to embark on a review of all our cultural venues, and today you have before you a report which ensures our county's historical story can still be told, while also contributing to much needed financial reduction targets. Officers have worked hard to model the impact of cuts on the museum, and in late spring I personally met with the museum to inform them of the financial challenges facing the authority and that we would need to work together to reduce expenditure whilst ensuring service delivery. This engagement led to a robust and effective conversation and correspondence, which resulted in a leader RMP meeting with Torrine Museum Trust in the summer when I was unfortunately indisposed. In consultation with the Trust, it was agreed a budgetary saving of £26,700 to be delivered in measured steps of 6675 over the next 4 years, starting in 2019-20. The decision to approve this funding reduction needs to be made by the 30th of September in order to meet our contractual obligations. We hope that by reducing the funding in smaller increments over a longer period of time, this will allow the organisation the time to adapt and make the necessary changes needed to acclimatise to the reduction in funding. I'd like to thank the officers, in particular Ashley Taylor, who has worked diligently with the museum in the last few years. We hope that this relationship can continue, and we will always endeavour to advise and help the Trust with their creative and innovative solutions to ensure an ongoing and sustainable future for the museum. Whilst we don't want to be giving cuts out, this does at least secure a service, and therefore commend this report to the Cabinet.
Okay. Thank you, Alan. I'll bring Rachel in.
Thank you, Leader. I think Councillor Jones has sort of like encompassed most of it. There has been sort of like a process of dialogue and engagement with the Trust. I think it's important that Cabinet do note that, you know, we still have a heritage officer who has a lot of expertise who can help them with different options for delivery. We actually have a meeting, myself and Ashley, with the curator next week to take forward what was agreed when the Leader and the MP, unfortunately Councillor Jones, wasn't able to make it when we met the board in the summer. So yes, whilst it is a reduction, we are hopeful that instead the historical legacy can be maintained and promoted, and further options to work with the museum moving forward. So it is quite clear we do have to give notice by the end of September, hence why this report is being brought forward today.
I'd like to thank Alan and Rachel and everyone for your work on this. This is one of the unfortunate realities of funding in the year 2018, unfortunately, and I think it's good that we've managed to work with the Museum Trust to try and reach a situation where we're not taking it away in a big lump, but can do something that hopefully they can work with. As you mentioned, I met with the Museum Trust members in the summer, and I'd like to thank them for the spirit of the engagement that took place, very much understanding the position we're in as a council, that we don't want to reduce funding in areas like this, but we have little choice if we're to properly fund core areas like schools, social care, housing, things like that. So I'd like to thank them for the work and the spirit in which they've engaged, and I hope that very much sort of signifies that the relationship we can have going forwards, both Alan, myself and officers want to work with the Museum Trust to help them in the longer term. I think there's been some good signs this year. The video games exhibition that they've run is a great way of getting new people into the museum and helping to boost their visitor numbers, and that's been a great success, and my kids have enjoyed it, and I probably have too. So I'd like to thank officers for their report and hope this sort of forms part of working with the Museum Trust in a positive way in the future.
A small point, but I think one well worth making. The wording of the report suggests that the leading of 4 years is to give the museum time to acclimatise themselves or accustom themselves to the reduced budget. But that doesn't rule out the museum and perhaps with some kind of assistance from us looking for new ways of generating. Is that the case? It isn't just a question that we're going to take this money away and in 4 years' time they'll have £50,000 and they'll have to like it or lump it. It's a question of it will be a 4-year period where they can conjure up other ideas, other ways and means of making the shortfall, perhaps.
I think it's a bit of both. It is a 4-year agreement to phase it down to 50,000 to help contribute to the medium-term financial plan. But in that period, as we have been, we will continue to work with them to identify new solutions, new models of working, new innovative ways of generating revenue. There are lots of grants out there, but they're mainly capital based, and it's revenue that the organisation needs to ensure its success. But even at the board meeting we went to, they're talking about, it's a beautiful building, doing more events, doing some more like one-off bespoke occasions which could help generate revenue into the museum. So that's what we'll be talking about next week, is how we can work together whilst we're reducing their core funding.
So that the
I think the museum responded very positively to the approach from Councillor Jones and then the leader. Obviously they'd rather it not happen, just like we all would, but they also accepted that and actually it was their proposal to put the phasing forward. There was a conversation about we recognise that, if our assessment was that if the museum, had to close, what would it cost us to maintain the collection? There would still be a cost to the council, and therefore it was their proposal to have it phased over a number of years to allow them to acclimatise and to look. So it's easier potentially to find £5,000 or £6,000 in one go than 26,000. So we will be working with them to try and bridge those gaps to keep it a success, or work with them to change their operating model to allow the museum to stay open.
Okay, we can move on to the recommendations. 13.1, the members will approve a reduction to Torvine Museum Trust core cultural grant funding of £26,700 over the next 4 years, and reducing amounts of £6,675 each year. Show of hands in favour? Thank you, that's carried. I'll move on to agenda item 8 then, which is... get Veronica back first. Don't you miss the fun. It's the Targeted Regeneration Investment Programme. Can we come on this? Rachel?
Thank you, Leader. This report tries to do a number of things, encompassing a whole sort of regeneration area. It's looking to identify the strategic priorities that the team will be working on to deliver economic development and regeneration in the county, but also aligning that to the regional strategies and also national strategies of Welsh Government. In December, a report went to Council advising Council of the Valleys Task Force and also the update on the Targeted Regeneration Investment Programme from Welsh Government, because they very much want to align the two. The Targeted Regeneration Investment Programme is £100 million from Welsh Government over 3 years, of which South East Wales has an allocation of £44 million. To do that, the region must work on a regional basis, and Welsh Government's initial thinking was that the City Deal Cabinet would be the place for which that level of delegation could occur. However, the heads of terms for the City Deal does not allow the Cabinet to make decisions on behalf of TRI and regeneration funding. So we had to come up with a different model while still working within the spirit and ethos of the City Deal, and that's what this report outlines. Torvine have, through a process of prioritisation and engagement, have tried to align local priorities with the regional and also national. And in this report it outlines that our regeneration projects moving forward is the Medipark, Springboard 2, the British, Pontypool Town Centre, and then Blaenavon World Heritage, the continued focus on tourism as a tool for regeneration. Some of the TRI money can be used for those projects, particularly if they are linked to the Valleys Task Force priorities for the Southern Torfaen settlement. We've worked hard with Welsh Government to move away from it being the Cwmbran Hub, which is what they called it in the Valleys Task Force, to call it the Southern Torfaen, so it can still link in the Pontypool work with a partner, with the RSL partners for housing change, as well as then Springboard 2 and the Medi Park. And I think trying to bring it all together will allow us then to seek funding in a better way. What the report also outlines is the governance for the Regional Regeneration Panel, which we have been asked to set up by Welsh Government because they want the funding allocated and prioritised at a regional level, and I'll go into that in a moment. First of all, though, in terms of those strategic projects I just outlined, Welsh Government have indicated that there is just over 900,000 indicative at this moment of receipts which have come forward from the previous Viable and Vibrant Places programme, which has enabled some of the town centres within Pontypool work with RSLs to turn back, to turn empty buildings into residential, and the receipts from that, officers have indicated they would be in agreement for us to put towards these strategic projects, and that is outlined in this report. Potentially 150,000 to go on top of the 50,000 Torfaen have already put into work on the Medi Park, 150 into the development of the Springboard 2 business case, 150,000 towards Pontypool Town Centre through the investment fund from the council's contribution, and 464,000 to the Pontypool investment to the RSL partners to allow them to do works to bring these projects forward. We do need development money to get these projects over the line. The Medi Park, we have secured 60,000 from Welsh Government and 50,000 from our own reserves to put towards that. It's a drop in the ocean. We're currently out to tender. It is likely this 150 will be needed as part of to get us to outline business case stage. Springboard 2, we've been speaking to Welsh Government officers because we're looking to do it on the Meritor site next to the Sixth Form College, where there's always a proposed office building. So we have begun talking to them about scoping out the business case in terms of how much would be general commercial and also incubation/digital space to allow our Springboard current occupiers to have space to grow, because we've hit a bit of a wall within Torfaen for lack of grow on space for these new businesses. So with your agreement today, if that is accepted, then we'll be writing back to Welsh Government officers to allow them to put a submission up to the Minister to agree for the VVP receipts to be used for those strategic projects. In terms of TRI then, at a regional level, I said Welsh Government have insisted that it be done at a regional level. I explained City Deal Cabinet cannot yet make that decision, and given the scale of City Deal and what they are working towards, it didn't felt that, because some of this regeneration is very local. Housing, town centre is not what City Deal is about. So what we've tried to do is to use, there's a programme board which is made up of directors or chief officers, and to use that meeting and to have a separate panel which would then be delegated and given approval by yourselves to allow me to operate on your behalf to work through the process. Within the documents you had the strategy, and within that strategy it gives the appraisal process on page 72 of a full assessment process about how schemes and projects would be prioritised at a regional level. I will say our projects aren't as well developed yet as some other councils, but this is a 3-year programme with then potentially more funding post-2021. So just because we're not in it now doesn't mean we can't be in it later on, and Welsh Government have also, they know what our projects are, and particularly in the short term they're very supportive of Spring 2 being one of the first ones to sort of go through that process. So the report is seeking to allow me to act on Torfaen's behalf, plus a deputy, which would be the head of economy and skills if I was unable to attend the regional generation panel, and to sort of make recommendations on behalf of the region to Welsh Government for the projects. However, Welsh Government do have the final say on there's almost a 2-stage evaluation process, which projects Welsh Government would be seeking us to address. Let's go back to the beginning, make sure I haven't missed anything. Sorry. Paper for me now. So I think that's it in the report. So it is basically the agreement of TRI funding, the VVP funding to come towards our strategic projects, for the creation of the regeneration panel, for me to also authorise to act on Torvine's behalf. And as an appendix was the regional regeneration strategy. That's the fourth recommendation. It is quite a hefty brief. Of course, it represents 10 council strategic projects. It was done in partnership, a big team effort on behalf of all the 10 councils and the lead regeneration officers. And it does represent Torvine fairly and robustly, I believe, in terms of our strategic priorities moving forward. So I recommend the report to you.
Okay, any contributions, members, before we move to the recommendations? On page 44, that we approve the final draft of the Regional Regeneration Plan on the terms set out in the report, that we approve the use of the THP receipts as set out in section 532, and to delegate authority to the Chief Officer of Neighbourhoods Planning and Public Protection, and the nominated Deputy, as Rachel just said, to act on the Council's behalf at the Regional Regeneration Board on the matters set out in section 5.5. Do a show of hands in favour? I believe that's carried. Moving on to agenda item 9, I believe we're deferring that so that we can see the final report at a future Cabinet meeting. So we move straight on to agenda item 10 then, which is the proposed disposal of Fir Tree Farm. And I'll bring in Victor and Veronica on this report.
Right, if I can just briefly outline to you where Fir Tree Farm is, because certainly I had no idea before I read this report. It's very close to Llandeigffordd Reservoir off of Swyddfad Road, down a small track. So it is quite out of the way. It's about 74 acres of grazing land predominantly, and a 3-bedroomed farmhouse with outlying buildings. It's been with the current tenant under two fixed tenancies since 1979, and actually passed into Torvine's remit with the change in local government in 1996. So we've been responsible for it since then. We are now, as you know, looking at all assets that we have. This is one with which there may be some complications, and for that reason I'm going to pass you over to Victor now, who can explain in detail the proposals that are being put forward today and the background to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crick. Good morning. Yes, the issue with the farm is essentially down to the stewardship of the farm. In all the time that the tenancy has been in place under our custodianship, there have been issues of land husbandry as well as just overall maintenance of the farm, which officers over the years have tried to address, and it has involved several departments and in some cases external agencies to try and address these issues, but they are recurrent. The council has got responsibilities for repair to some extent, but even when those repairs have been undertaken, because of the way the farm is being looked after, shortly afterwards, this expense has to be incurred again. The income from the farm in terms of the rent is quite low, £3,700 at the moment, and this is down to the fact that there is a life tenancy which limits the extent to which you can charge rent, because there's no market for the farm apart from the one tenant. So we have tried to engage with the tenant over a long time and try to find solutions to the issues, but we haven't really made progress. And the amount of officer time that has gone into it is quite extensive and, as I say, quite recurrent. And this being outside your core priorities, or ownership of the farm or management thereof, we have come to this position where we propose that we try to divest ourselves of the ownership of the farm. We are limited in what we can do because of the life tenancy. In any other kind of landlord and tenant arrangement, if a tenant was in persistent breach, you would seek to terminate the tenancy. But the advice that we've received is that for a lifetime agricultural tenancy, the only way to do that would be to go through a court process, which in itself is expensive, but there is no guarantee of a successful outcome, because apparently case law indicates that the courts tend to lean towards giving the tenant another chance and another chance. So it would be an expensive process without any guarantee of an outcome. So the proposal that we are putting forward to you is for us to enter into negotiations with the farmer, where we propose that the farmer surrenders the tenancy on the terms that would be agreed, which would allow us to sell the farm with vacant possession. If that was not acceptable to the farmer, which is likely because he has been in this place for a long time, is familiar, and this is the lifestyle that he's accustomed to, which is a valid consideration, then perhaps we would consider a surrender of part of the farm so that the holding that he has is smaller and hopefully more manageable. And then whatever is surplus from that negotiation, we would then look to put on the market. If both of those options were not acceptable to the farmer, then the last proposal would be to sell the farm subject to the lifetime tenancy. So what would change is the landlord, and we would be out of the picture in that case. Whichever option we go with will have to be through a negotiation, and will have regards to the well-being of the individual involved. But the ultimate position is that we need to be in a position where we are spending less resources or none at all on management of the farm. So that's the proposal in essence. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica and Victor, for that explanation of the situation. If I can move this then to recommendations on page 320, that Cabinet authorises the Assistant Chief Executive Resources to negotiate terms for surrender of one or both tenancies and to enable disposal of the entirety of the farm with the vacant possession of the tenant farmer as agreeable. 12.2, that Cabinet approves that the part or parts of the farm the tenant may agree to surrender following negotiations may be deemed surplus to council requirements and officers be authorised to market the surplus land. 12.3, that in the absence of a negotiated agreement, Cabinet approves that the entirety of Fir Tree Farm be deemed surplus and marketed subject to 2 tenancies. And 12.4, that Cabinet grants delegated authority to the executive member for performance and corporate governance, that's Veronica, to determine any other matters pertaining to surrender of the tenancy, proposed disposal that may require further executive approval as a Cabinet member with responsibility for operational asset management. Never show of hands in favour? That's carried. Thank you, Victor. That brings an end to today's meeting. Thank you, members.